is right to repair. A lot of people find this one complicated, so here's the shortest and simplest description I can muster, based on the Attorney General's language in the 2020 Voter Information Guide. That's the Red Book sent out by the Secretary of State. If passed, this law would provide motor vehicle owners and independent repair facilities expanded access to mechanical data related to vehicle maintenance and repair, more specifically wireless data, known in the industry as telematics. So manufacturers who want to sell in Massachusetts would have to equip any motor vehicle, model year 2022 or newer, with what's called an open access data platform. That means owners could see their own mechanical data on a mobile app, and they would have the option to share that same data with independent repair facilities or independent dealerships of their choosing. And those shops would also then be able to send commands to the vehicle for repair, maintenance, and diagnostic testing. On the S side of this issue, I'm joined by Tommy Hickey, director of the Right to Repair Coalition, and on the no side, Connor Units, spokesperson for the Coalition for Safe and Secure Data. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Tommy, you're the yes side. Briefly, tell us why people should be voting yes.
Sure. So in 2012, I hope Massachusetts voters remember, we voted in favor of the right to repair at 86%. It is the highest passing ballot initiative in Massachusetts history. Mandated that independent repair shops and dealerships get the same information. But there was a carve out in the law. Technology has obviously evolved. There was a carve out for wireless communications, a system called telematics. In this year, 2020, 90% of new cars will have this telematic capabilities, giving the car manufacturers a monopoly on the repair market. This ballot initiative would close that loophole and give owners all direct access to their wireless information.
Connor, why should people vote no?
Tommy mentioned the ballot question in 2012. There was a carve out for telematics in that ballot question, but that ballot question is not the current law in Massachusetts. The existing law was passed in 2013. It brought together both that previous ballot question with another law on the books, and the existing law in Massachusetts ensures that all telematics information that's necessary for diagnosis and repair must be provided to dealer repair shop. It's already covered under this current law, and everything else is an expansion of access to data grabbed by retail auto parts suppliers.
Connor, I want to read from the argument you guys provided to the Secretary of State for the voter booklet. Question one has nothing to do with fixing cars. Question one, as you said, is a data grab by third parties who want to gather your personal vehicle information and access it remotely, including location data in real time. So should we assume, since there's not one word about sharing data or independent dealers, that the people behind the vote no are just selflessly concerned about my privacy? No, I'm serious, by the way. And the sharing of data is not a problem for them at all if the privacy issues were addressed?
The no side is fully funded by automakers. I'll be very clear on that. And it's fully funded by automakers because question one represents a threat to their vehicle safety systems and their vehicle systems. So the first thing that question one does is it expands the definition of mechanical data to be anything related to the diagnosis or repair. That's an intentionally broad term that can be applied to anything in the vehicle.
Is it an intentionally broad term, Tommy? You wrote it.
No, listen, we fix cars for a living. Car manufacturers always want independent repairs at the mercy of them and the dealership. This is about all the information necessary to fix your car. We believe the owner bought the car and they should have direct access to that.
So, Connor, back to you. The language that you say is unnecessarily broad reads that the data is any vehicle-specific data, including telematics, used for or otherwise related to the diagnosis, repair, or maintenance of the vehicle. What's not clear about that? What's not limiting about that? It's mechanical data. It's not location data or personal data.
It's the otherwise related to. It's an incredibly broad term that can be applied to anything. And look, the existing law excludes navigation data explicitly. Question one does not. Question one eliminates that exclusion. Question one, if it really wasn't about location data, it would have taken about 8 words for it to say nothing will apply to location.
But if it really was about location data, I read the Attorney General's summary, which is neutral. She mentions the term mechanical data 6 times by my count, never once mentions location data or personal data, or as you call it, location data in real time. She's not on either side. If there was a threat, why didn't she target it?
Again, the bill expands the definition of mechanical data. And look, there's precedent here. This same effort was made in California. In that effort, they did specifically say GPS location data. They learned their lesson. They lost. So when they came back to Massachusetts, they broadened it out so that they could make this case that it wasn't about location.
Tommy, do you have no concern about my data being secure? Is your position, is there 100% off base the vote no people, or is there a concern and you just consider it to be minor?
No, remember, this is diagnostic and repair information that independent repairers are currently getting through the OBD port. This information is already protected in ways and is already accessible. It's now becoming wireless, just like every other technology in our life. We want that same information wirelessly, just as the car manufacturers already do and share with their dealerships.
So why don't you do exactly what Connor suggested, is be explicit about what it excludes so he couldn't make the argument he's making, and so the voter could be assured that he isn't right?
Because we wrote it in a way to say you need all the information necessary to diagnose, maintain, and repair the car. You do not need GPS information. You do not need personal information for that. And we call on the car manufacturers to create this platform. They should not create this platform with GPS and personal information. If I had to write a bill with all the things I didn't want, I think it'd be a pretty long list.
You know, Tommy, getting to your argument submitted to the Secretary of State, we passed, as you said, the first right to repair law in 2012, but as new cars become more computerized, auto manufacturers are using a loophole to restrict access, et cetera. You yourself have admitted, Tommy, in interviews I've read, that the competitive threat is 5 to 10 years away. So if the threat is not right now, why are you spending millions of dollars? It suggests that there may be another agenda here other than just a level playing field.
Well, I've admitted that it's going to get increasingly worse, but it is starting now. And remember, when we did this in 2012, we were late. Independent repair shops went under. Consumers had to pay more. We see models right now, 2020 models, independent repairers cannot fix, whether it's firewalls over the OBD port or missing wireless codes. It's happening today in model year 2020, and it's going to get increasingly worse as we move to electric cars without OBD ports and more wireless technology that isn't covered under the law.
But how soon is the threat real? You said 5 to 10 years in an interview. People who see a threat 5 to 10 years away usually don't spend tens of millions of dollars when they could still lobby the legislature to do what they're hoping to achieve.
Well, as I said, in 2020, up to 90% of cars have these capabilities right now. This calls for model year 2022. I think you can imagine how much technology will be in those vehicles.
You know, Connor, going back to your argument for a second, you focus on domestic. A similar proposal failed in California after the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault warned from this information a third party such as a sexual predator could stalk or harm victims. And it's amongst the most, I'd say, powerful of your television ads as well on that issue. But once again, as you admitted a few minutes ago, the California bill, which I believe failed, explicitly included location data. At best, you're inferring that this does, but there's nothing specific. So isn't that a little misleading to the voter?
It's misleading to the voter that the Auto Care Association, which wrote question 1, has been saying they don't want location data, and then going around the country showing a mock-up of what they want the app to look like. And then their version of the app, they have maps, they have location data, they have behavioral data. So their $21 million that they've invested here in Massachusetts is telling the voters one thing, which is different from what they're telling consumers around the country.
We'll get Tommy's response to that, but you didn't answer my question. Isn't it misleading to be quoting a California organization about a failed bill that explicitly included location data, which I agree is scary, but this bill does not explicitly do the same thing?
No, I don't think it's misleading at all, because again, there is an explicit provision taking this out of the current law that is not present in the question 1.
Tommy, how about the claim that Connor made a minute ago about the organizations that are behind your side of this question pouring millions of dollars into it as well, parading around the country about what the app will provide? How do you respond to what he said?
Whatever the Auto Care Association gets involved in at the federal level or in Europe, and Europe is far ahead of us in terms of how we deal with wireless technology, is not this ballot initiative. I mean, we just talked about this California piece. This is not the California piece. The California piece wanted real-time geolocation. It wanted access by third parties directly. That's not this initiative. This initiative gives car owners directly the information generated by their car for diagnostic repair and allows them to authorize an independent repair. That's not the legislation that was in California.
Connor, let's go back to the first question I asked you off what Tommy just said. Why shouldn't I have access to that data any way I want. And if I am willing, even if you're right, if I am willing to put myself at greater risk than I'm currently in, because the automakers have the data now, so I assume we got to trust them, why shouldn't I be able to make that decision by myself and not have you make it for me?
We don't disagree on that point. A lot of automakers already are making this information available. They're doing it in a very secure way where the information is encrypted. It goes through OEM servers and it goes directly to the consumer. There's never direct access to the vehicle. There's not the ability to upload code to the vehicle, and it's done in a way that protects the consumer while also giving them choice. That's the way automakers are moving. It's moving on a pace where this can be tested and safe.
Tommy, why didn't you give the legislature more time to do this in a more measured sort of way rather than having a multi-million-dollar TV ad battle that I think you'd both have to admit is confusing a lot of voters in Massachusetts?
We would very much have loved to deal with this in the legislature. We filed a bill in the first month of the session of 2019, January of 2019. In order to be eligible for the ballot, you have to apply with the Attorney General's office by August of 2019. Get the 100,000 signatures. We didn't have a hearing until January of 2020. The car manufacturers managed to block this in the legislature and refused to sit down with us.
Connor, let me get back to where I started with you too. Assuming that your fears about the protection of the data were allayed, would the automakers be comfortable with the independents, the small guys and gals, the small businesses having access to this information?
The concern is not around the local mechanics. The local mechanics already have access to this data now. As Tommy said, when you bring your car into the shop, that's what the current law protects.
But that's a plug-in. That's a plug-in. Is there any reason they wouldn't have access to the wireless data? Are you opposed to that, or just concerned allegedly about privacy data, sensitive data?
We're concerned that question one opens a gateway into vehicle computers that can be exploited by bad actors. It lowers the bar for entry.
Okay, so that being the case, what I don't understand in this discussion, from these 10 minutes, it seems to me the major dispute is about what language in the ballot question says and what data it allows to be accessed and what not. So why haven't you two guys, instead of spending tens of millions of dollars, agreed to go to the legislature with your common concern and say, we both want you to amend this language should it pass? And it seems to me that allays your fears, Connor, and still allows you to get what you need to get. Connor, very quickly, you first. Why not?
In 2012 we tried that, Jim, and there was a bill passed. Both sides agreed, but the question one folks pushed forward anyway and still went forward with their ballot question. There's no reason to believe they would accept a legislative agreement this time either.
Well, but could you draft language that would make you happy, Connor?
These two sides met for 4 years and couldn't reach a conclusion.
But that's not the answer to my question. Is if it turns out your concern is this sensitive data, why don't you draft something about sensitive data, give it to Tommy, see if he buys it, and walk up to Beacon Hill?
I'm sure that will be on the agenda post-election day if this passes.
Tommy, would you do that?
I think the proof is in the pudding. The car manufacturers have a monopoly on the repair market. Why would they ever sit down with us except to do this by law, which is what happened in 2012 until the last hour of the session. So I don't think they'd sit down with us. I don't think they want to give us this information. They have a way to circumvent the 2013 right to repair law right now.
Tommy, Connor, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and good luck on Election Day. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next up, question 2, otherwise known as ranked choice voting. Once again, this explanation is based on the Attorney General's description. If passed, this law would create a system in which voters rank candidates by order of preference. Then votes would be counted in a series of rounds. So if one candidate got more than 50% of first place votes in round 1, that candidate would win outright. But if not, in round 2, the candidate or candidates who received the fewest first place votes would be eliminated, and the voters who picked them as their first choice would then have their second choice vote counted instead. If at that point a candidate had secured more than 50% of the vote, the contest would end. But if not, the rounds would continue until a candidate did pass the 50% threshold. The process would only be used for elections in which a single candidate is being elected versus multiple candidates, and it would not be used for elections for president, county commissioner, or regional district school committee member. It would take effect January 1st, 2022. On the yes side of the issue, I'm joined by Danielle Allen. She's director of Harvard's Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics. And on the no side, Anthony Amore, former Republican nominee for Secretary of State. And before we get into this, I do want to note, 20 years ago, I was elected to the Cambridge City Council in a ranked choice voting system, which some may see as an endorsement of the plan, and others, I'm sure, maybe not so much. Danielle and Anthony, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Danielle, can we start with you? Give us briefly, why is the yes vote the correct one?
You made the most important point in providing the language from the Attorney General. That is, this way, somebody has to get past the 50% threshold to win office. So it increases the legitimacy of our elected officials, and that supports better responsiveness in our political institutions.
Anthony, why is a no vote the way the voters should go in Massachusetts?
Well, there are a lot of reasons, amongst them being that we believe that the ballot is far too confusing and that too many people are disenfranchised from voting because of ranked choice voting. But I would also say that it doesn't accomplish what the pro side says it does. A study by the Maine Policy Institute showed that over 60% of the elections they looked at, the winner does not reach 50% of all the votes cast. So it doesn't actually get to that 50%.
Do you want to respond to that, Danielle, any of that?
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. So it's really important to recognize that when nobody gets 50% in the first round, then the ideal situation is a runoff so that you can go ahead and add more votes to the heap till somebody's heap gets over 50%. And indeed, when we have runoffs where they're scheduled, a week later, 2 weeks later, and so forth, one sees a remarkable decline in the electorate. And the final group of people that would vote on a runoff that happens spread out over time that way is always lower than that first round of votes. So in ranked choice voting, what you have is instant runoff in effect. And actually, when you have that decision in the second or third round, you have many, many more votes contributing to the decision than when you have those runoffs spaced out over time. So indeed, the person is getting a majority of the votes that have made it cast all the way through first round, second round, third round. And they're more than you would have in a runoff procedure.
Anthony, I want to read to you from the argument your side submitted to the Attorney General's office. You cite two Democratic governors rejecting ranked choice voting because it was confusing. Governor Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, both from California, and that's accurate. Isn't it more relevant that two governors from Massachusetts, a Republican, Bill Weld, and a Democrat, Deval Patrick, support this than how two California governors feel about it?
No, not at all, Jim, because the two California governors experienced it. Especially Gavin Newsom in San Francisco. Deval Patrick and Bill Weld have never governed in a state where ranked choice voting was in place. I think it's obvious that we should look to governors who have actually had it in place, and just like other places like Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Burlington, Vermont, that had it and then rejected it. So no, I would only turn to people who've operated under it.
Danielle, I want to ask you about, I'm sorry, go right ahead, and then I want to ask you about something in your argument. Go ahead.
I'll respond to that briefly. So Governor Weld, of course, also lived for many years in Cambridge, and in that regard did operate under a ranked choice voting system. So he has direct experience of it. Also, it's really important that for Governor Brown and Newsom in California, they rejected ranked choice voting as an alternative to what they did choose, namely open primaries and top two runoffs. So they actually agreed that we should reject our current plurality system. They chose an alternative method for doing that than ranked choice. And they didn't think the two methods should be combined together. That's very different from rejecting the notion that we need the kind of preference voting that ranked choice gives us.
Danielle, I want to stay with you and read from the arguments your side submitted to the Secretary of State. Ranked choice voting, you wrote, addresses three problems. Big money and corrupt special interests have too much control. And then the third item is politics are tearing us apart. Maine has ranked choice voting. The Collins race Gideon race in Maine satisfies neither of those criteria. Last time I looked, $60 million had been spent, and it was as bitter a race as one could possibly imagine. So if those are the two reasons for a yes vote, aren't they undercut by what we're watching right before our eyes, 100 miles or 50 miles to the north?
So the reasons that I would give for a yes vote are the fact that it gets you elected officials who've won more than 50% of the vote, the fact that it diversifies candidates who put their hat in the ring to run for office, and the money piece is a part of that. I'll come back to that in a minute since you asked a question about money. And then the third reason is that does actually, evidence suggests, generally improve the quality of campaigning. So there's a study out of Rutgers that shows that voters who live in ranked choice system have a lower degree of remembering divisive campaign fighting. We live in a very polarized age, so I think in this year of 2020, it's very hard for anybody to avoid divisive campaigning.
Anthony, you want to respond to any of that?
Yes, I'm glad you brought up the idea of money, and it's ironic that the pro side would cite outside money and big money being spent on campaigns when the pro side has $5 million invested in this campaign, with far over 80% of it coming from outside the state, most of it coming from three billionaire donors. So big money is controlling this actual election. That's who put ranked choice voting on the ballot, $300,000 for 200,000 signatures, all of that money coming from outside the state.
That's not
Danielle,
the case.
I mean, you are outspending the other side dramatically, and a lot of money is from out of state, is it not?
That is certainly true, but the ranked choice movement in Massachusetts is a grassroots movement that started here. 200,000 signatures collected here on the basis of volunteers. The success of the work here has meant that people who are generally democracy reformers have noticed and have contributed to the effort here.
Anthony, I want to go back to you, and I have a it doesn't feel right question for you, and then it doesn't feel right question to Danielle. Starting with you, as virtually everybody knows, on the North Shore, Lori Trahan was elected with less than 25% of the vote. Just recently, Jake Auchincloss became the Democratic nominee for the seat currently occupied by Joe Kennedy with less than 25%. And by the way, he has endorsed ranked choice voting, as have all the others in that race. Does it feel right for you that an important position in our government should be filled by somebody who 3/4 of the voters did not endorse?
Well, no, and I can address that, though. First, let me say that it's also an argument against ranked choice voting, because in that 4th congressional district race, you had 9 people who had hardly a difference between them. Most people today cannot name who those 9 people were. You don't
have to vote for 9 people, as you know. You can vote for 1 person, 2 people, as many or as few as you choose.
And the risk there is that your ballot becomes exhausted and you don't even actually have a say in the final runoff unless you guess correctly when you go in and you rank them. But also, let me be clear, if there was ranked choice voting in that 4th congressional race, it wouldn't have been the winner having 50% of the votes. It would have been 50% made up of a mishmash of first place votes, second, third, fourth, fifth. It's not.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Because it's not people's first choice. So you're taking the people at the end. You start off by lopping off the person who finished last, the person least palatable to most voters, and they have the most power. Their votes, they get a second round vote. And if the election ends right there, it's first past the post. And then you have a bunch of people who voted once and a bunch of people who voted twice. So it doesn't really even fit or seem fair. It should be 1 person, 1 vote. And that's why we are not opposed to a race like the 4th congressional district being held like they are in Boston for the mayor. The top 2 finishers, Jake and Jesse, would have run head to head, and you would have made your choice between the 2.
Danielle, wouldn't that be a simpler solution, what we do in Boston?
In fact, it's a better solution to go ahead and use the preferential voting system to build the runoff into that vote when you go the first time. You keep more people involved in the process, participation increases.
So I want to get to the thing that doesn't feel right about the yes side to me. There are at least 2 races that I've read about, one a congressional race in Maine, one a mayoral race in Burlington, Vermont, a pretty progressive, enlightened community, where the person who finished first in the first round did not end up becoming the mayor or the member of Congress. Ultimately, the votes that were accounted second, third, and beyond, I don't know if it went beyond, elected somebody who hadn't finished first. Does that feel right? And do you not worry that that won't feel right to voters?
It does feel right to me, actually. And so this gets to the notion of 1 person, 1 vote. Yes, everybody gets one vote. And if your first choice votes goes through, then that's a yes with a really intense preference. If it's your second choice, it's still a yes with a medium preference. Third choice, it's still a yes. The point is who gets more than 50% of the yeses in a given race. And yes, I think that's fine if some are intense yeses and some are medium yeses.
You know, Anthony and Maury, in terms of confusion, what do you do when you go to vote and there's a down ballot race where you don't know anything about the people or the office? I assume you do what I do, which is you don't vote. Is that what you do if you're not informed enough? That's one way to deal with confusion, is just vote for people who you do know.
No, that is what I would do, Jim, and maybe you too. But I would say that there are studies that show people are inclined to go in and cast a vote. They want to take that affirmative step. And when they're given more options, they vote for more people. And studies show this. So that is what happens. So you do wind up having people guessing when they go down and they rank along the ballot. But the other part of that, Jim, is that when you do this, you bring confusion into the system. And when you have ranked choice voting, it's indisputable that you have a marked increase in the number of ballots that are spoiled and thrown out. So you have a dramatic increase. The ACLU of Kansas did a study and showed that 10% of the ballots were thrown out in a race in Minneapolis. And these ballots that are thrown out come from what are in Minneapolis traditionally communities of color. So you also have an issue with people who speak English as a second language having trouble with the ballots too. And finally, exit polls show older voters have more difficulty with these confusing ballots. So that's a concern.
If I may, I only have 30 seconds left, Danielle. It's a perfect segue to what was my final question. It seems to me the jury is still out on whether candidates of color and voters of color benefit from ranked choice voting. Can you quickly tell me what evidence you have that they do benefit?
There have been increases in elected officers in the Bay Area communities that use ranked choice voting for both minorities and women. The NAACP of Boston has endorsed this. Amplify Latinx has endorsed this. With League of Women Voters has endorsed this, which cares a lot about voting rights. So I think there's strong support. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley has endorsed this. There's strong support for the notion that this opens up opportunity.
Danielle Allen, Anthony Amore, I really appreciate your time and your arguments. Thanks so much, and good luck in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight. If you haven't registered to vote yet, it is not too late. The deadline is this Saturday, October 24th, and you can do it online at registertovotema.com. If you have a mail-in ballot and haven't sent it in yet, I encourage you to do so as soon as possible, or better yet, find your secure local drop box to leave it off. Early voting runs through Friday, October 30th, although dates and hours vary by location. Of course, the final day to vote is November 3rd. Thanks for watching, and please stay safe.
Irish?
On Finding Your Roots, actor Taya Lee